I rewatched Fury the other day, and I really was reminded that despite some flaws, it's one of my favorite war movies of all time. The setting and historical context were very well done, in a way that I've never really seen before in an American World War II film. Although there is plenty of combat action, it's really a film about what war does to a person's psyche, and how soldiers lean on each other to survive mentally as much as they do physically in combat. It takes place during the final American drive into Western Germany, a time that is often glossed over in World War II history. In reality, the drive into Germany cost the US nearly the same number of casualties as D Day and the breakout in Normandy, and Fury really shows that there was plenty of hard fighting in the last months of the war. One thing that Fury does exceptionally well is showing the general state of the army in late World War II, worn out, beaten down, and suffering from manpower shortages. The Battle of the Bulge a few months earlier was the costliest battle in US Army history, and the Army struggled to make up casualties that were lost in that fight. There was a mix of combat veterans and brand new, barely trained replacements on the front lines, which gives Fury its setting. The amount of small details that Fury gets right are exceptional. Bulldozers pushing piles of bodies into mass graves, Brad Pitt's character using a captured German assault rifle as his personal weapon, massive formations of American heavy bombers streaming overhead to level cities, Jason Isaacs' character wearing a captured Luftwaffe flight jacket, and the general look of the infantrymen. These guys really look like they've been fighting and living outside for months on end. One thing that is consistent in frontline veterans' memoirs is their recollections of just how filthy everything was after fighting on the line for a few weeks, and they really look the part. I also liked how unflinching the movie was when showing their attitudes towards fighting. Most of the veteran soldiers were hardened killers by this point, and Fury does not shy away from this. Now, this film was criticized heavily by tank buffs for its Tiger fight scene, because historically the model of the Sherman tank in the film could have killed the Tiger from 800 plus yards away. But in my opinion, it's a really well done example of American tanks being outgunned at times by German tanks, and an exciting scene overall. Plus, it has the only functioning Tiger tank in the world in it. But the final battle is what I would like to focus on for today's video. Here's a quick rundown on the cinematic resolution to the film. When the crew of the titular M4 Sherman, the Fury, find their tank disabled and an approaching enemy SS battalion en route to flank Allied forces, they make the selfless choice to hold their ground and fight the entire SS squad in an immobilized tank, no matter the cost. War Daddy and his crew give the Nazis hell and take many of them down, but one by one they ultimately fall in battle. Only new recruit Norman Ellison gets the chance of survival, slipping out of a hatch underneath the tank where he hides in the thick mud. As the battle between the SS and the Fury ends, and the Nazis, now much thinner in number, continue on their way, there is a tense moment where the boyish SS soldier looks under the tank and sees the young Allied soldier hiding in the mud. Instead of raising alarm, the young SS soldier, surprisingly enough, chooses to ignore Norman and continue on his way without a word. That act of mercy allows Norman to survive the night and make it to the new day as the sole survivor of the Fury. That being said, the ending of Fury is a great depiction of a final stand and an equally great conclusion to an amazing film. The real story that the film takes inspiration from differs in many ways, from the type of tank to the possibility that the real story had even more German troops than the movie. Prepare yourself to be blown away by the very real story behind this epic last stand. On January 26, 1945, Audie Murphy and some 40 US troops sat shivering in a frigid, snow-covered clearing near the Alsatian town of Holzwehr. The battle-weary soldiers had been ordered to hold a vital roadway until reinforcements arrived. But the operation was delayed, and the promised relief was nowhere to be seen. Just after 2 p.m., the winter stillness was suddenly broken by the thunderclap of an enemy artillery barrage. In the distance, some 250 German troops and 6 tanks emerged from the woods. As he watched the Germans line up for an attack, Murphy felt a wave of panic rise in his belly. It was a familiar feeling, one he'd learned to control during 18 months of bitter fighting across Italy and France. At just 19 years old, the baby-faced Texan had already won 2 Silver Stars and the Distinguished Service Cross, and he was leading men 10 years his senior into battle. Once the shooting began, he knew his instincts would take over. The nerves will relax, he later wrote. Quote, The heart stop its thumping, the brain will turn to animal cunning. The job is directly before us: destroy and survive. Murphy knew that his men stood no chance against such a large force, so he instructed most of them to withdraw to pre-prepared defensive positions along a nearby tree line. As they ran for cover, he stayed behind and used his field telephone to call in an artillery strike. He had just enough time to radio his coordinates before salvos of German tank fire erupted around him. One shell immediately drilled a tree near a machine gun nest and showered its crew with deadly splinters of wood. Another hit a nearby tank destroyer and set it ablaze. Murphy's command post was collapsing before his very eyes, but he held his ground and continued calling in the Allied artillery. In seconds, a curtain of friendly fire rained down between him and the advancing German infantry, pitting the open field with craters and shrouding everything in a haze of smoke. After emptying his M1 carbine at the enemy, Murphy grabbed his field telephone and took cover atop the burning tank destroyer. Over the radio, he could hear the artillery commander asking how close the Germans were to his position. He yelled, "Just hold the phone, and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." The tank destroyer was slowly being engulfed in flames. Murphy saw its 50 caliber machine gun turret was still operational. He quickly seized the gun and sprayed a withering fire against the German troops nearest his position. "My numbed brain is intent only on destroying." Murphy later wrote in his autobiography, "I am conscious only that the smoke and the turret afford a good smokescreen, and that, for the first time in 3 days, my feet are warm." He continued firing burst after burst, mowing down Nazi troopers by the dozen and keeping the tanks at bay. All the while he remained on the phone, directing artillery fire ever closer to his own position and dealing catastrophic damage to the advancing infantry. From their cover on the edge of the tree line, most of Murphy's troops could only watch in shock. Quote, "I expected to see the whole damn tank destroyer blow up under him at any minute," Private Anthony Abramsky later wrote. In fact, the blaze may have saved Murphy's life. Many of the German troops and tank commanders couldn't see him behind the veil of smoke and flames, and those that did resisted getting too close out of the fear that the vehicle was about to explode. Despite the hail of Allied artillery shells, fresh waves of German infantrymen continued inching towards Murphy's position. One squad tried to make a flanking maneuver on his right side, only to be cut down in a hail of pinpoint fire from his 50 caliber gun. As Murphy continued his one-man attack, German gunners riddled his smoldering tank destroyer with small arms and tank fire. One blast nearly threw him from the vehicle and sent razor-sharp shrapnel flying into his leg, but he took no account of the wound and kept fighting. It was only when Murphy ran out of ammunition that he finally withdrew. Dazed and bloodied, he jumped from the still-burning tank destroyer and limped to his men. He later wrote that as he walked away, one thought in particular kept racing through his mind: "How come I'm not dead?" Murphy's men were no doubt wondering the same thing. "It was the greatest display of guts and courage I have ever seen," a stunned Abramsky later wrote. For an hour he held off the enemy force single-handed, fighting against impossible odds. Murphy had personally killed or wounded some 50 enemy troops and directed artillery against dozens more. Even after reaching safety, he refused to be evacuated from the field and instead rallied his men in a counterattack that drove the Germans back into the woods. Audie Murphy was hailed as a national hero and awarded the Medal of Honor for his jaw-dropping exploits at Holzwihr. Not wanting to risk the life of its newest celebrity soldier, the Army reassigned him as a liaison officer and did its best to keep him out of combat until the war ended. By then, the battle-hardened GI had endured 3 wounds, a nasty case of malaria, gangrene, and more dead friends than he cared to remember. Murphy returned home in June 1945 to a hero's welcome of parades, swarming reporters, and his face on the cover of Life magazine. On the advice of screen legend James Cagney, he later took his boyish good looks to Hollywood, where he forged a film career that included more than 40 credits, most of them in westerns and war films. His most famous role came in 1955 when he played himself in To Hell and Back, a blockbuster adaptation of his own memoir about World War II. Reliving the horrors of combat in front of the camera proved difficult for Murphy, who had suffered from nightmares and flashbacks since returning home. He later spoke publicly about his decades-long struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder, and urged the U.S. government to provide better mental health care for its veterans. To Hell and Back was a smash hit. The film was Universal Studios' most profitable release until Jaws in 1975, and it helped seal Murphy's reputation as one of the most famous American veterans of World War II. But despite having won several dozen medals for valor, he always resisted attempts to label him a hero. Quote, "Bravery is just determination to do a job that you know has to be done. I just fought to stay alive, like anyone else, I guess." It is nearly impossible to compare the two stories directly, with one being a real account and the other being loosely based off of it. Thank you for watching this video, and let me know some of the differences that you would have liked to see in the movie that could be taken from the real story. In my opinion, a difference that would somewhat change the battle and fury would have been the inclusion of the artillery support that Murphy had access to, although I could definitely see how that could ruin the last man standing feeling of the final battle. But like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below. While you're down there, consider leaving a like or even subscribing, as it really helps the almighty YouTube algorithm show my content to others. Speaking of content, you can find some more of mine above if you would like. And if not, once again I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next video.